A single father met a young woman in a wheelchair on a blind date and thought she was after his money, but what she revealed left him in tears and changed their lives forever. A story of love and second chances that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. The air conditioning in the cafe in Greenwich Village struggled against the suffocating heat of December in New York. David Johnson arrived 15 minutes late, sweat sticking his navy blue dress shirt to his back as he searched for an empty table in the crowded establishment. At 38, he had developed the habit of arriving a few minutes late to social commitments, a small rebellion against others' expectations, especially those of his sister Mary. "David, you need to meet this girl," Mary had insisted the previous week during Sunday lunch at her house in Brooklyn. "She's a university professor, smart, beautiful, perfect for you." David had grumbled between bites of barbecue, reminding his sister that he was perfectly fine on his own. "Thank you very much." 2 years after the tumultuous divorce from Sarah, he had found a comfortable, rhythm-raising Emma, his 12-year-old daughter, without the need for romantic complications. But Mary was persistent, like a dripping faucet, and eventually he gave in, more to silence her than out of genuine interest. Now, scanning the cafe with his eyes, David wondered how he would recognize a complete stranger. Table by the window, brown hair, green blouse, had been the vague description Mary had given him. His eyes scanned the environment, young couples sharing desserts, executives in informal meetings, students hunched over laptops. Then he saw her. By the large window overlooking Harmony Street, a woman in her 30s was sitting in a modern silver aluminum wheelchair. Her brown hair fell in soft waves to her shoulders, framing a face with delicate features and lightly tanned skin. The emerald green blouse she wore was clearly expensive. David recognized the quality of the fabric even from a distance. She was tapping on her smartphone with nimble fingers, her perfectly manicured nails painted a subtle red. David stopped mid-stride, feeling a mix of surprise and something he couldn't name. Mary hadn't mentioned that the so-called university professor used a wheelchair. For a moment, he considered turning back and making up some excuse, but something in her eyes, when she finally lifted her gaze from the phone and found him standing there like a post, compelled him to keep walking. "David," she asked, and her voice had a slightly husky tone, as if she had just woken up. "Yes, you must be—" He realized he didn't even know her name. Mary's friend. "Helena," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, surprisingly strong. "Helena Montero. Please, have a seat." David pulled out a chair, noticing how Helena observed him with an unreadable expression. There was something guarded in the way she held her shoulders back, as if she were perpetually prepared for battle. "Sorry for being late," he said, taking off his blazer and hanging it on the back of the chair. "The traffic on Fifth Avenue was impossible." "It's fine," Helena replied, returning to her phone. "I'm used to it." The phrase hung in the air between them, laden with a meaning that David couldn't decipher. He discreetly watched as she typed a quick message. The screen of her smartphone briefly showed what appeared to be a conversation in English before she turned it face down. On the table. "So," David said, trying to break the ice, "Mary told me you're a professor." Helena raised her eyes, an almost amused expression crossing her face. "Consultant, actually. Your sister sometimes simplifies things." "Consultant for what?" "Various fields," she replied vaguely. "Mainly companies looking to improve their processes." "And you?" "Mary said you work with numbers." "Accountant," David said, suddenly feeling embarrassed by the simplicity of his profession compared to what he imagined was her sophistication. "I have an office downtown, nothing too glamorous, mainly small businesses, some freelancers." Helena nodded, but David noticed her eyes drifted to the window for a moment, as if she were only half paying attention. Her phone vibrated again, and she checked it quickly. "Sorry," she murmured. "It's a busy day at work." David ordered an espresso for himself and was surprised when Helena ordered a cappuccino and a chocolate croissant, speaking to the waiter as if she knew the place well. "Do you come here often?" he asked. "Now and then, when I'm in the area." She took a sip of her cappuccino when it arrived and closed her eyes for a moment, as if savoring not just the coffee but the pause itself. "Do you have kids?" The question caught him off guard. "One daughter, Emma, 12 years old." "Tough age," Helena commented, and there was something in her voice, a softness that hadn't been there before. "How is she dealing with this?" She made a vague gesture that David interpreted as referring to their meeting. "She doesn't know about this," David admitted. "I mean, she knows that Mary has been trying to set me up with women, but—" He stopped, realizing how that sounded. "Not that you're a setup, I meant." For the first time, Helena genuinely smiled, and the smile transformed her face completely. "Relax. I know exactly how it is. Friends and family always think they know what's best for us." They sipped their coffee in a more comfortable silence for a few minutes. David noticed how Helena handled the cup with natural grace, how she moved with an economy of gestures, nothing wasted. When she leaned to grab something from her designer handbag that David recognized from the storefronts on Fifth Avenue, he briefly saw a thin scar at the base of her neck, almost hidden by the delicate necklace she wore. "Can I ask—" he started but stopped himself. "What?" "No, nothing. Sorry." Helena looked at him with curiosity. He studied for a moment. "You want to know about the chair?" It wasn't a question, and David felt his face heat up. "I wasn't—" "You were. Everyone wants to know. The difference is that some ask, while others are dying of curiosity and pretend they didn't notice." She took another sip of her cappuccino, watching him over the rim of the cup. "Car accident. 7 years ago. Next question?" Her brutal honesty completely disarmed him. "I don't have any other questions." "You do. Everyone does. But it's okay. You don't have to pretend it doesn't matter. It does, right? Otherwise Sarah would have mentioned it." David shifted in his chair, feeling as if he were being tested in some way. "Sarah didn't mention it, did she? Maybe she thinks it shouldn't matter. And should it?" The question left him speechless for a moment. He looked at Emily, really looked at her, and saw beyond the wheelchair, beyond the expensive clothes, beyond the apparent sophistication. He saw a beautiful woman, clearly intelligent, who was challenging him to be honest with himself and with her. "I don't know," he finally said. "I've never thought about it before." Emily nodded as if that were the answer she expected. "Honesty. I like that." Her smartphone vibrated again, and this time she answered. "Hi, John. No, I'm still busy. Can you move it to Monday?" "Perfect. Bye." "John," David asked, trying to sound casual, "my physical therapist. I have sessions 3 times a week." She checked the time on her phone. "By the way, I need to go in a few minutes." David felt a pang of disappointment that surprised him. "Sure. Do you want me to call a cab or—" Emily laughed, a genuine and musical sound. "I drive, David. I have an adapted car." Of course she does, he thought, feeling foolish. "Sorry, I didn't—" "Don't apologize so much. It's better to ask than to assume things." She signaled to the waiter. "Shall we split the bill?" "No, let me pay," David said automatically. "Why?" The question caught him off guard again. Because it's a date, and on dates the man always pays. Generally. Even when the woman probably earns more than he does? David turned red. "You don't know how much I earn. You drove here in a 2015 Civic that needs an air conditioning check," Emily said calmly. You wear a Casio watch that must have cost around $200. Your shirt is nice, but you clearly iron it yourself. I can see it on the sleeves. I drive an adapted BMW X1 that cost $45,000 up front. I can pay for my own cappuccino." David was speechless. "How do you—" "I observe people," Emily said, placing $40 on the table. "It's part of my job." She maneuvered the wheelchair easily between the tables, and David followed her, still processing what had just happened. The sidewalk, she unlocked a metallic grey BMW with a remote. "That was interesting," Emily said, positioning herself next to the driver's door. "Thanks for the coffee." "Would you like to do this again someday?" David asked, surprised by his own courage. Emily studied him for a long moment. "Why?" "What do you mean, why?" "Why would you want to see me again? Because you felt sorry? Because you thought you should? Or because you really want to?" David considered the question seriously. Emily Thompson was different from any woman he had ever met. Direct, challenging, clearly independent, and with a mystery that intrigued him. And there was something more, something he couldn't name. "Because I want to," he finally said. Emily smiled, the second genuine smile of the afternoon. "Then call me." She handed him an elegant business card. "But call me because you want to, not because you think you should." David watched her transfer from the wheelchair to the car with fluid, practical movements, folding the wheelchair and placing it in the back seat. As she drove away, he stood on the sidewalk for a few minutes, holding the business card and trying to understand exactly what had just happened. On the card, in elegant letters, it read, "Emily Thompson, Accessibility and Inclusion Consulting," and below, a phone number. When he got home in Queens, Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table. "How was your date, Dad?" she asked without looking up from her math notebook. "How do you know I had a date? Aunt Sarah told me. She said you were meeting a teacher." David poured himself a glass of water and sat next to his daughter. "And what do you think about that?" Emma finally looked up, studying her father's face. "Did you like her?" "I don't know yet," David said honestly. "It was complicated." "People always are," Emma said with the precocious wisdom of someone who had spent the last 2 years observing the adults around her trying to rebuild their lives after the divorce. That night, after Emma went to bed, David sat on the balcony of his apartment looking at Emily's card and trying to decide whether he should call her. There was something about her that had caught him completely off guard. Not just the wheelchair, but the way she had challenged him, how she had seen through him with almost surgical imprecision. He picked up his smartphone 3 times before finally dialing the number. "Emily, it's David, from the date this afternoon." "Hi," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Have you changed your mind about wanting to see me again?" "Actually," David said, "I was wondering if you would like to have dinner with me tomorrow, somewhere I can pay the bill without you doing a complete psychological profile of my financial situation." Emily laughed. "I accept. But only if you promise to stop apologizing for everything." "I can try. It's a start." When he hung up the phone, David realized he was smiling for the first time in months. There was something about Emily Thompson that intrigued him deeply, and he was determined to find out what it was. The Italian restaurant in Little Italy was filled with families celebrating the weekend when David arrived. The following Saturday, he had chosen the place carefully. A relaxed atmosphere with homemade food and fair prices where he wouldn't feel intimidated if Emily repeated her insightful financial analysis. She was already there when he arrived, positioned at a table near the window. She wore a navy blue dress that accentuated her eyes, and David noticed that several people were discreetly watching her, some with curiosity, others with what seemed to be admiration for the natural elegance with which she carried herself. On time this time, Emily commented as he approached, a smile playing on her lips. "I'm trying to make a good impression," David replied, pulling out the chair. "It's working." The waiter, a middle-aged man with a southern accent, approached with familiarity. "Good evening, Miss Emily, the usual." David raised his eyebrows, surprised. "You know her?" "Miss Emily has been coming here for about 3 years, the waiter explained with a warm smile. "Always very polite, always leaves a good tip. Brought a new boyfriend, huh?" David felt his face heat up, but Emily laughed naturally. "This is David, Mr. Johnson. He wants to try your famous cheese pastries." "Ah, excellent choice. Shall I bring 2 pastries and 2 mojitos?" "Perfect," said Emily, and David nodded, still processing her familiarity with the place. Once they were alone, he couldn't contain his curiosity. 3 years coming here?" "I like the authenticity," Emily said simply. "And Mr. Johnson makes the best pastries in the city. Besides, they never look at me like I'm a curiosity." David surveyed the environment. Simple families, workers relaxing after a hard week, children running between tables. It wasn't exactly the kind of place he expected to find someone who drove a BMW and wore designer handbags. "You're hard to read," he finally said. "Why? Because I don't fit your expectations?" "Maybe." David took a sip of the mojito when it arrived, savoring the sweet and tangy flavor. "You clearly have money, but you choose places like this. You wear expensive clothes, but come to a restaurant where the main dish costs $20. Emily cut a piece of the pastry, the melted cheese oozing out. "And is that a problem?" "It's not a problem, it's confusing." "Maybe the problem is you thinking that people with money can only like expensive things." David considered this while eating. There was truth in her observation, but something else bothered him, a feeling that Emily was constantly testing his reactions, as if she were evaluating something he couldn't identify. "Tell me about your job," he said, changing the subject. "Consulting in accessibility, according to your card." "I help companies become more inclusive," Emily explained. But David noticed she kept the information vague. Physical adaptations, employee training, internal policies, that kind of thing. Must be a lot of work. Some months more than others. Actually, next week I'm going to Miami for a big project. A hotel chain wants to implement accessibility improvements. David felt a twinge of something he recognized as jealousy, which surprised him. "How long will you be there?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. Emily watched him closely. "Why?" "Curiosity," he lied. Her phone rang, and she excused herself to answer. David couldn't help but overhear fragments of the conversation. Something about meeting on Monday and feasibility report, said in a professional tone that contrasted with the informality she showed with him. "Sorry," she said as she hung up. "Work. Work or jealous boyfriend?" The question slipped out before David could censor himself, and he immediately regretted it. Emily looked at him with an unreadable expression. "It was a joke," he said quickly. "Sorry, it wasn't my place." "I don't have a boyfriend," Emily said calmly, "and if I did, I wouldn't be here with you." The rest of dinner went more smoothly. Emily shared funny stories about eccentric clients, and David found himself genuinely relaxing for the first time in months. She had a sharp sense of humor and a way of looking at the world that made him see familiar things from different angles. When the bill arrived, Emily insisted on splitting it again, and this time David didn't protest. "Thank you for dinner," she said on the sidewalk. "It was pleasant." "Pleasant?" David pretended to be offended. "Just pleasant?" "Don't worry, you'll improve with practice." They laughed, and David felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Can I see you when you get back from Miami?" Emily hesitated for a moment, so briefly that he almost didn't notice. "Sure, but now you have my number. You don't need your sister to set up more dates." 2 weeks passed, and David found himself thinking about Emily more than he would like to admit. Emma noticed his distraction. "Dad, are you flirting with that consultant on WhatsApp again?" she asked Thursday night, finding him smiling at his phone. "I'm not flirting with anyone," David said, quickly putting the phone away. "And she's not a teacher, she's a consultant." "What's the difference?" "Consultants make more money." Emma studied him with the irritating insight of a 12-year-old. "You like her? I barely know her." "But you like her." David sighed. "It's complicated, Emma." "Why?" How to explain to a 12-year-old that he was simultaneously attracted to and intimidated by Emily, that there was something about her that made him question his own perceptions of himself, that the way she challenged him was both frustrating and exciting. "She's different from the people I'm used to meeting," he finally said. "Different how?" "More sophisticated." Emma wrinkled her nose. "Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet." When Emily returned from Miami, they met for coffee in Central Park. She looked tanned and relaxed, wearing a light dress that David didn't recognize. "How was the trip?" he asked. "Productive," she said, but again was vague on the details. "And you? How did you spend those 2 weeks?" "Working, taking care of Emma, the usual." Emily nodded, stirring her coffee sugar with a thoughtful expression. "David, can I ask you something?" "Sure. What are you looking for? In a relationship, I mean." The question caught him off guard. "I don't know if I'm looking for anything. I'm still kind of recovering from the divorce. 2 years ago? It's a long process." Emily studied him for a moment. "Or are you using that as an excuse not to take a risk again?" The observation hit him like a punch to the gut, especially because there was truth in it. "And you? What are you looking for?" "Honesty," she said without hesitation. "Someone who sees me as a person first, everything else second." "And can I do that?" "Sometimes," Emily said, smiling. "Other times you get so worried about trying to say the right thing that you forget to be yourself." David laughed, recognizing the truth. "You don't make it easy for a guy, do you? If I wanted easy, I'd date anyone." They walked through the park after coffee, Emily maneuvering the wheelchair effortlessly along the paved paths. David noticed how she greeted some vendors by name, how she stopped to pet dogs that approached, how she observed everything around her with an attention that suggested she didn't consider anything irrelevant. "Can I ask you about the accident?" he finally said. Emily slowed the wheelchair. "You can ask. I can't promise I'll answer." "Does it hurt?" "Sometimes, especially when it's going to rain." "Do you miss it? Walking, I mean." Emily stopped completely and looked at him. "Every day," she said, with a raw honesty that surprised him. "But not in the way people imagine. I'm not sad looking at stairs. I miss little things. Walking barefoot on the grass, dancing until 2 in the morning, running to catch a bus." David nodded, trying to imagine what it would be like to lose those simple things and realizing he couldn't truly comprehend. "But you know what I don't miss," Emily continued. "The person I was before. I was kind of superficial, a bit selfish. The accident forced me to grow." "Do you think you needed the accident to grow?" "No," she said firmly. "I don't romanticize what happened to me. It was crap, plain and simple. But since it happened, at least I managed to take something good from it." Her frankness completely disarmed him. "Do you always talk like this, so directly? I learned that life is too short for beating around the bush." When they said goodbye that afternoon, David found himself thinking about how Emily was different from anyone he knew. There was an intensity in her, a way of living that was both inspiring and a little scary for someone who had spent the last 2 years trying to keep life simple and predictable. That night, he called her. "Hi," he said when she answered. "Hi back." I wanted to thank you for the afternoon. Why? For being honest with me, for not pretending that things are easier than they are. There was a pause on the other end of the line. David? Yes? Are you falling for me? The question left him speechless for several seconds. Why do you ask that? Because I need to know. If you're falling for the person I am, or the idea you have of me. David considered the question seriously. I still don't know who you really are. At least you're honest, Emily said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Can I find out? You can try. And that's how David found himself embarking on something he couldn't define, not exactly a date, not exactly a friendship, but something in between that promised to be more complicated and more real than anything he had experienced before. March arrived with the first autumn rains in New York, and David found himself in a strange routine with Emily. They saw each other twice a week, always in different places, always at her suggestion, and always with the feeling that he was being tested in some way he couldn't comprehend. On Thursday night, Emily took him to a rooftop restaurant. David felt uncomfortable in the elevator, looking at his reflection in the mirror and noticing how his simple clothes contrasted with the sophistication of the environment. When they arrived at the restaurant, the table Emily had reserved offered a panoramic view of the illuminated city. How did you get a table here? David asked, trying not to show how intimidated he felt by the atmosphere. I called and asked, Emily said simply, studying the menu as if it were the most natural thing in the world. David opened his menu and swallowed hard upon seeing the prices. The cheapest dish cost what he usually spent on a week's worth of lunches. He tried to disguise his reaction, but Emily was watching him closely. Any problem? She asked. No, none, David lied, quickly closing the menu. Everything looks delicious. The waiter approached, a young, well-dressed guy with an accent David couldn't place. Good evening, would you like to try the chef's tasting menu? It's 7 courses paired with selected wines for just $80 per person. David felt his stomach drop. $80 was almost what he spent on groceries for an entire month. Sounds wonderful, Emily said without hesitation, but I prefer to order à la carte. I'll have the truffle mushroom risotto and a glass of Argentine Chardonnay. David quickly glanced at the menu. The risotto cost $20. His bank account had $160 until the next payment on Monday. And for you, sir? I'll have... David desperately searched for something cheaper. The grilled salmon, he finally said, finding a $50 option. Excellent choice. And to drink? Just water. Emily raised her eyebrows slightly. Are you sure? They have an excellent wine list. I have to drive, David said, avoiding her gaze. When the waiter walked away, an awkward silence settled between them. Emily fiddled with her bag, a designer handbag that David recognized from a commercial on TV, and took out her phone, checking messages. Work? He asked, trying to start a conversation. Client in Dubai, she said distractedly, typing a quick response. Time. Difference. You know how it is. Yeah. David didn't know, but he nodded anyway. He watched Emily respond to 2 more messages in English before putting her phone away. Sorry, she said. Sometimes work doesn't stop. No problem. It must be stressful dealing with international clients. Emily studied him for a moment. Sometimes, but it's rewarding too, especially when we can make real changes. The food arrived, and David had to admit it was delicious. The salmon was perfectly grilled, accompanied by vegetables he had never tried before. Emily enjoyed her risotto with evident pleasure, occasionally offering him a taste. Are you enjoying it? She asked. Very much, David said honestly, although I'm probably more of a barbecue guy. Emily smiled. Nothing against barbecues, but sometimes it's good to try different things. Have you always liked this? David gestured vaguely at the luxurious surroundings. Like what? Expensive places, sophisticated things. Emily set her fork down and looked him straight in the eye. David, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you uncomfortable here? David considered lying, but the intensity of her gaze made him choose honesty. A little. Because of the money. He nodded reluctantly. And do you think I brought you here to humiliate you, to rub it in your face that I have more money than you? I don't know why you brought me here, David said. Emily sighed. I brought you here because the food is good and the view is beautiful. I didn't think about the rest. Easy to say when money isn't a problem. The remark came out more bitter than David intended, and he saw something change in Emily's expression. She was quiet for a long moment, stirring her risotto without eating. You're right, she finally said. It was insensitive of me. The admission caught him off guard. He expected her to be defensive or irritated. Emily, I didn't mean... No, she interrupted. You were right to say it. Sometimes I forget that not everyone, that things are different for different people. They finished the meal in a less tense but still awkward silence. When the bill arrived, Emily grabbed it before David could see it. I'll treat, she said firmly. Emily, David, you said this bothers you, so let's not pretend it doesn't. I chose the place. I pay. As they left the restaurant, while waiting for the valet to bring her car, David felt compelled to speak. Thank you for dinner, and I'm sorry if I was difficult. You weren't difficult, Emily said. You were honest. It's different. Sometimes I don't know if you want me to be honest, or if you want me to pretend certain things don't bother me. Emily looked at him in the dark of the New York night. I always want you to be honest. Even when, especially when, honesty is uncomfortable. The following Saturday, Emily suggested they meet at her place in Upper East Side. David drove through the tree-lined streets of the neighborhood, observing the elegant buildings and imposing doormen, feeling increasingly out of place. The building where Emily lived was discreet yet clearly expensive, with 24-hour doorman service and well-kept gardens. The doorman greeted her by name and let David in with a professional smile. The apartment was on the 8th floor and had a partial view of Central Park. When Emily opened the door, David was surprised by what he found. He expected ostentation, but the apartment was stylish without being over the top. Simple yet quality furniture, lots of white and light wood, green plants in ceramic pots. Nice, he said, and he meant it. Thank you. Would you like something to drink? Coffee, water, wine? Coffee sounds great. David watched Emily move around the open kitchen with practical efficiency. Everything was at the right height for her to reach, and he noticed small adaptations that made the space functional without drawing attention. Did you design the adaptations? He asked. Some, Emily said, putting water to boil. Others came with experience. You learn what works. There were photos scattered around the room, Emily in various places around the world, always smiling, often with people David didn't recognize. In one, she was standing, clearly before the accident. You traveled a lot, he observed. I travel, Emily corrected. I haven't stopped traveling because of the chair. Sorry, I didn't mean to. David, Emily said, bringing 2 cups of coffee and positioning herself in front of him, you need to stop apologizing for everything. It's not a crime to be curious or make observations. They drank coffee on the sofa, and for the first time David felt truly relaxed in her presence. Without the pressure of a public setting, Emily seemed more human, less polished, more genuine. Can I tell you something? She said suddenly. Of course. Sometimes I test you, Emily admitted, on purpose. David almost choked on his coffee. What do you mean? The places I choose, the things I say. Sometimes it's to see how you react. Why? Emily sighed. Because I've dated men who pretended my financial situation didn't matter when it was the only thing that did. And I've also dated men who pretended my disability didn't matter when they really couldn't handle it. David processed this. And me? How do I do on the tests? You're honest about feeling intimidated by money, Emily said. And you treat me like a normal person, not like a pity case or a trophy. That's rare. So did I pass? Emily smiled. You passed most of them. And where did I fail? You're still trying to figure out if I'm worth the discomfort, she said with a frankness that disarmed him, if it's worth getting involved with someone who comes with complications. David was quiet for a moment because she was right. And is it worth it? I don't know, Emily said. Only you can decide that. Her phone rang, interrupting the moment. Emily looked at the screen and frowned. I need to take this, she said. It's work. David watched her speak in English for several minutes, using technical terms he didn't understand. When she hung up, Emily looked worried. Are you okay? He asked. Difficult client, she said vaguely. Sometimes people don't understand that accessibility is an investment, not an expense. That must be frustrating. It is, but it's part of the job. David wanted to ask more about her work, about the international clients, about how she had built an apparently successful career. But there was something in the way Emily talked about work. Always vague, always quickly changing the subject. That made him hesitate. When he left that afternoon, David found himself thinking that he had known Emily for almost 2 months, but still felt as if he were looking through frosted glass. She revealed parts of herself in controlled doses, always maintaining a certain mystery that was both intriguing and frustrating. On Sunday, he received a message from her. Thanks for yesterday. It was nice having you here. He replied, It was nice being there. When will I see you again? Next week I'm swamped. Complicated project. I'll call you when. I have some free time. David stared at the message for several minutes before responding, Sure. But for the first time, he wondered if Emily was really busy, or if she was testing him again, seeing if he would be patient, if he would insist, if he would pull away. And the realization that he didn't know what answer she expected left him more frustrated than he would like to admit. The invitation came on a rainy Tuesday in February, when New York was gearing up for Mardi Gras. David was at the office, reviewing the accounts of a small bakery when his smartphone buzzed. Hi, want to come with me to a VIP box at the stadium on Saturday? I got 2 tickets, Emily's message read. David reread the message 3 times. A VIP box at the stadium meant money, a lot of money. He quickly searched online and nearly choked when he saw the prices. Boxes cost between $3,000 and $5,000 per person. He called Emily immediately. Hi, she said, picking up on the second ring. Emily, how much did those tickets cost? Why do you ask? Because I saw the prices online and I can't accept you spending $10,000 in one night. Emily laughed. David, relax. The tickets were complimentary. A client was happy with a project and gave them to me as a gift. Are you sure? I'm sure. It's going to be fun. Have you ever been to the stadium? David had never been. Mardi Gras, for him, had always been synonymous with street parties in Greenwich Village or local samba events downtown. The idea of the stadium intimidated him almost as much as expensive restaurants. No, he admitted, then it's going to be an experience. I'll pick you up at 7. On Saturday, David spent an hour deciding what to wear. He opted for a white dress shirt and dark jeans, the most stylish he could manage without looking like he was trying too hard. When Emily arrived to pick him up, he barely recognized her. She wore a shimmering gold dress that sparkled under the streetlights, her hair cascading in waves that framed her meticulously made-up face. She looked like a version of herself that had stepped out of a magazine, sophisticated in a way that made David suddenly feel out of place. You look Stunning, he said as he got into the car. Thank you, Emily smiled, but there was something different in her expression, an excitement he rarely saw. I love Mardi Gras. It's one of the few times of the year when New York really lets loose. The traffic was chaotic, but Emily navigated the streets with the patience of someone who was used to it. During the ride, she hummed classic samba tunes, and David found himself watching this more relaxed side of her with growing fascination. When they arrived at the stadium, David was impressed by the organization of the VIP parking. A uniformed valet took the car keys, and Emily was greeted by a hostess who seemed to know her. "Ms. Emily, great to see you. Is your box the same as always?" the young woman asked with a professional smile. "The same as always?" David repeated when they were alone in the elevator. Emily seemed slightly uncomfortable. "I've been coming for a few years, whenever I can." The VIP box was in the prime section, with a privileged view of the stage. It was a spacious area with about 40 people, waiters circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and a gold and red-themed decoration. David recognized some faces, a TV presenter, a soap opera actress, business people who appeared in the social columns. "Emily!" exclaimed a blonde woman in her 50s, dressed in a red sequined outfit. "Darling, what a joy to see you." "Hi, Laura," Emily replied, accepting the cheek kisses. "This is David." Laura quickly assessed David with the kind of look he knew well, the instant social analysis that determines status and relevance in seconds. "Nice to meet you," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What do you do, David?" "I'm an accountant," he replied, immediately seeing her interest wane. "Oh, how interesting," Laura said in a tone that suggested she considered the profession anything but interesting. "Emily, darling, I need to introduce you to John Smith. He's expanding his network of clinics and is looking for consultants for an accessibility project." David watched as Emily was led to meet potential clients, circulating the VIP box with a social ease that impressed and intimidated him simultaneously. She spoke in English with an Argentine couple, exchanged business cards with executives, and laughed at jokes he couldn't hear. A waiter approached with a tray of champagne. David took a glass, more to have something in his hands than out of a desire to drink. "First time?" a man in his 60s asked him. "Yeah, it is." "I'm John Smith," the man said, extending his hand. "And are you Emily's boyfriend?" "David Johnson, and yes, I guess so." John smiled. "I guess so. Young man, it's either yes or no." "It's complicated," David said, watching Emily animatedly converse with a group of executives. "Emily is a special girl," John said, following his gaze. "I met her family many years ago. Her father, Robert, was my—" David felt his stomach sink. What happened? John seemed to realize he had said something he shouldn't. "Oh, family issues, you know how it is." But Emily has always been headstrong, brave, but headstrong. Before David could ask more, Emily returned, looking slightly out of breath. "Sorry to leave you alone," she said. "I ran into some old clients." "No problem. John was telling me about your father." David saw a shadow pass over Emily's face so quickly that he almost didn't notice. "John loves to talk about the past," she said with a forced smile. "Shall we find our seats? The parade is about to start." They sat in plush chairs in the front row of the VIP box. The view was spectacular. They could see the entire length of the track, the packed grandstands, the contagious energy of the crowd. When the first parade group began to perform, David found himself genuinely moved by the beauty and grandeur of the spectacle. Emily knew the history of each group, explaining the details of the floats, singing along with the parade songs. There was a passion in her voice that David had never seen before, as if Mardi Gras awakened a part of her that remained hidden the rest of the year. "It's incredible," he said during a pause between groups. "It's magical," Emily agreed, her eyes sparkling. It's one of the things I love most about America. All this creativity, this ability to turn difficulties into art. During the performance of the Vai group, David noticed that Emily sang the parade song with particular emotion. The theme spoke of overcoming challenges, of finding strength in adversity. "A special group for you?" he asked. Emily nodded. "It has a special meaning. It was the first parade I attended after the accident. I cried through the entire performance. Why? Because I realized that beauty hadn't ended, that I could still feel, still participate in things greater than myself." David felt a tightness in his chest at the vulnerability in her voice. It was the most honest moment they had shared, but the magic was interrupted when Laura approached again, clearly intoxicated from the champagne. "Emily, darling, Carlos is very interested in your work. He wants to schedule a meeting next week." "Great," Emily said, returning to a professional tone, "and he said he can pay very well. You know how these health companies have money." Laura laughed loudly. "It's not like your rebellious girl days, is it? When you gave up everything to prove a point." David saw Emily tense up. "Laura." "What? David doesn't know the story?" "Darling," she turned to David, "did you know that Emily gave up $1 million inheritance to live on a salary? A true princess turned Cinderella." The silence that followed was deafening. David looked at Emily, who was pale, clearly furious at Laura's indiscretion. "Laura, I think it's best if you go back to your friends," Emily said with a dangerous calm. "Oh, sorry, darling. I thought you'd already told him." Laura walked away, finally realizing the tension she had created. David stared at Emily, processing what he had just heard. $1 million inheritance? Family business? Suddenly, many pieces began to fit together. The knowledge of the VIP box, the expensive car, the designer clothes, the social ease. "Emily," he began. "Not here," she said firmly. "Please." They watched the rest of the parade in tense silence. Emily maintained her composure, but David could see the rigidity in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched on the armrest. When they left the stadium, it was already past 5 in the morning. The streets were filled with revelers heading home, but inside the BMW, the silence was absolute. "Are you going to explain it to me?" David finally asked when they stopped at a traffic light in Bella Vista. Emily sighed deeply. "What exactly do you want to know?" "Everything. The inheritance, your family, why a woman who can afford VIP boxes splits the bill at restaurants." "I don't pay for the VIP boxes," Emily said calmly. "Laura pays. She likes to have interesting people around, and I'm her example of overcoming challenges." "And the inheritance?" Emily was quiet for so long that David thought she wouldn't answer. "My father owns a construction company," she finally said. "Thompson and Associates. Maybe you've heard of it." David had. Every New Yorker had heard of it. Thompson and Associates was responsible for some of the largest developments in the city, including several shopping centers and commercial buildings. When I was 25, I discovered that the company was using low-quality materials in affordable housing projects, poor people living in buildings that could collapse at any moment, while my father pocketed the difference. David remained silent, waiting for her to continue. I confronted him. I demanded that he stop. He said I was naive, that all construction companies did this. When I insisted, he offered me a promotion at the company to silence me. Emily's voice was heavy with bitterness. I refused. I threatened to go public. Then he cut me off from the inheritance and kicked me out of the family. And then came the accident. 2 years later, I was working as a physical therapist, earning my own money, proving that I could live without his dirty money. Emily laughed without humor. "The universe has an interesting sense of irony." David processed the information. "And your family? Did they help you after the accident?" My father showed up at the hospital once. He said if I came home and stopped making a scene, he would pay for the best treatment in the world. Emily parked in front of David's building. I told him to screw off. The rawness of her language surprised him, but somehow it made sense. Emily had spent years building an armor of politeness and sophistication, but underneath there was anger, a justified and deep anger. So how do you live? I have some savings from before the cut-off, investments my grandmother left me, and work, obviously. As an accessibility consultant. Yes, Emily looked at him. That's what, did you want to know? If I'm a spoiled rich girl spending my dad's fortune, or a woman working to support myself? I wanted to understand why you didn't tell me this before. Emily turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment. Because most men react in two ways. Either they feel intimidated thinking I'm too rich for them, or they become overly interested, thinking they can take advantage of me. You were already dealing with money issues. I didn't want to complicate things further, David understood. And now, has anything changed? I don't know, Emily said honestly. You tell me. David watched her, the wrinkled gold dress after the long night, the slightly smudged makeup, the vulnerability she tried to hide behind her composure. She had entrusted him with a painful and complicated truth, and he could see in her eyes the fear that this would change everything between them. Want to come up for a coffee? He asked. We can talk better. Emily hesitated. It's almost 6 in the morning. Perfect time for a morning coffee. She smiled, the first genuine smile of the night. Okay. As they rode the elevator, David realized he was finally starting to get to know the real Emily. And although the truth was more complicated than he had imagined, it was also more interesting. The woman beside him was not just beautiful and sophisticated, she was brave, regal, and had sacrificed privileges for her values. That should have impressed him. Instead, a part of him wondered what other truths Emily was still hiding. David's apartment in Queens seemed even more modest. After the night in the VIP box, as he brewed coffee in the small kitchen, Emily looked at the photos on the fridge. Emma at various ages, crayon drawings stuck with magnets, a simple and genuine life that contrasted sharply with the golden world they had left behind at the stadium. She's beautiful, Emily said, pointing to a recent photo of Emma. Takes after her mother, David said, bringing 2 cups. Lucky her. They sat on the small sofa in the living room, and for the first time David felt embarrassed about his own apartment. The furniture was functional, but cheap. The rug was faded, and there was a leak in the living room ceiling that he still hadn't managed to save up to fix. David, Emily said softly, can I ask you something? Of course. What are you thinking? Since we left the stadium, you've been different. David took a sip of coffee, trying to organize his thoughts. I'm trying to understand who you really are. What do you mean? For the past 3 months, you've been too careful, always vague about work, always paying your own bills, always choosing places that are neither too expensive nor too cheap. He looked at her. Now I find out that you gave up millions, that you know businessmen, that you go to carnival VIP boxes. It's like I'm dating 2 different people. Emily was quiet for a long moment. And is that bad? It's confusing. It makes me think about what else you haven't told me. Like what? David hesitated but decided to be completely honest. Like, for example, if you're with me out of pity. The question caught Emily off guard. Pity? For you? Think about it, David said, getting up from the sofa and walking to the window. You're beautiful, smart, sophisticated. Even without the fortune, you clearly have a much more interesting life than mine. Why would you be with a divorced accountant living in a rented apartment in Queens? Emily watched him for a moment. Do you really think that? I don't know what to think. David, look at me. He turned, and Emily was serious. Do you think I'm with you out of pity? That I chose to date the poor guy because I feel guilty for having money? Maybe. Or maybe you're with me because I'm safe, because I won't leave you because of the chair, like the others. The accusation hung in the air between them. Emily was very quiet, and David saw something change in her expression. I understand, she finally said. Emily, I didn't mean... No, you did, and you're right. She placed the cup on the table with deliberate care. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm with you because it's comfortable, because you don't challenge me like the other men did. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. Emily maneuvered her chair toward the door. Thank you for your honesty, and for the coffee. Emily, wait. No, David. You said what you needed to say. Now I'm going home to think about what you said. Please, don't leave like this. We can talk about it. Emily paused at the door and turned around. You know what your problem is, David. You're so worried about not being good enough that you don't stop to think that maybe, just maybe, I like you for who you are, not for who you're not. She left, leaving David alone in the living room at 6 in the morning on a Sunday, with the sound of the elevator echoing down the hallway and the feeling that he had just ruined something important. During the following week, David tried to call Emily 3 times. Each time it went to voicemail. He sent 2 messages, one apologizing, another asking if they could talk. She didn't respond. On Thursday, during lunch, Lisa showed up at his office. Hi, brother, she said, walking in without knocking. Can we have lunch? Lisa, I'm working. It's about Emily. David looked up from the computer. What about her? She called me yesterday. David felt his stomach drop. And what did she say? That you two fought, and that it was all your fault. Lisa sat down in the chair across from his desk. Want to tell me what happened? David summarized the night at the stadium and the conversation afterward. When he finished, Lisa was shaking her head. You're an idiot, she said bluntly. Thanks for the support. David, she told you she gave up millions for principles, and your first reaction? Raphael questioned the reasons why she was with you. It wasn't exactly like that. It was exactly like that. Lisa leaned forward. Do you know what Emily told me? That for the first time in years she had found a man who treated her like a normal person, and you made her feel wrong for that. David felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. She said that? Among other things. She also said that maybe you two aren't really compatible. What does that mean? It means she is considering breaking up with you permanently. That Friday, Emma noticed her father's gloomy mood. Dad, you've been acting strange since Sunday, she said during dinner. I'm fine, sweetheart. You're not. You're looking sad. Is it because of your girlfriend? David almost choked on his beans. How do you know about the girlfriend? Dad, please, do you think I don't notice? You smile at your phone, bought a new shirt, started wearing cologne. Emma made a face. And Aunt Lisa told me that you two had a fight. Lisa shouldn't have told you that. Why not? She's my girlfriend too, kind of. If you two are going to get married, she'll be my stepmother. Emma's casual observation caught him completely off guard. In all the months of dating Emily, he had never thought in terms of long-term future marriage or Emma having a stepmother. Emma, that's not how it works. Why did you two fight? David looked at his daughter, 12 years old, too smart for her age, with curious and concerned eyes. Because Dad was an idiot, he said honestly. What kind of idiot? The kind that gets scared of not being good enough and ends up ruining the good things he has. Emma nodded wisely. Can you apologize? I tried. She doesn't want to talk to me. Then you have to try harder. It's not that simple, Emma. It is, Emma said, with the absolute certainty of childhood. If you like her and did something stupid, you apologize until she accepts. It's what you always tell me to do when I fight with my friends. On Saturday morning, David made a decision. He drove to the Upper East Side and parked in front of Emily's building. He stayed there for 2 hours, waiting to see her come out, trying to muster the courage to go up and knock on the door. She appeared at 11, leaving the parking lot in her BMW. David followed her at a distance until she stopped at the Whole Foods supermarket on Augusta Avenue. When he saw her maneuvering the cart between the aisles, he finally approached. "Emily?" She turned, and David saw genuine surprise in her eyes, quickly followed by something that looked like exhaustion. "David, what are you doing here?" "Trying to talk to you." "In the supermarket? You don't answer my phone calls," Emily sighed. "I'm grocery shopping. It's not a good time." "When would be a good time?" "I don't know if there is a good time." David felt genuine panic. "Emily, please. 5 minutes. Let me explain properly what I meant." "You already explained. It was pretty clear." "No, I wasn't. I was a scared idiot talking. Nonsense, because I was afraid." Emily stared at him. "Afraid of what? That you're too good for me? That one day you'll realize you can have someone better and leave? And that's why you decided to push me away before I had the chance?" The question hit him hard. "Maybe." Emily was quiet for a moment, watching him. "David, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Have you ever stopped to think that maybe I'm scared too? That maybe I think you could find someone without complications and decide it's not worth it?" David had never thought of that. "Emily, do you think it's easy for me, dating knowing that there are some places I can't go, that there are some things I can't do, knowing that people will look at us and make judgments?" "I never what? Never thought about it?" "Of course you have. Everyone does. The difference is that you were learning not to care, and I was learning to trust that you didn't care." David felt a tightness in his chest. "And now?" "Now I don't know anymore." An elderly lady passed by pushing a cart and looked at them curiously. Emily sighed. "David, let's talk properly, not here." "Where?" "At my apartment. But let's settle this once and for all, for better or for worse." During the drive to the Upper East Side, each in their own car, David thought about everything that had happened since that first meeting at the cafe in Greenwich Village. 3 months of a relationship marked by misunderstandings, mutual tests, and the constant feeling that they were both walking on a minefield. In Emily's apartment, they sat facing each other in the sunny living room. "David," Emily said, "I need you to understand one thing. I'm not with you out of pity or because you're safe. I'm with you because you made me laugh on our first date, even after finding out about my wheelchair. Because you treat Emma kindly without pretending to be the perfect stepfather. Because when you kissed me for the first time, it felt like you were kissing a woman, not a disabled person." David felt like an idiot. "I'm so sorry for everything I said." "I'm sorry too," Emily said. "I'm sorry for not being more open about my life, for testing you instead of trusting, for letting you find out about my family. In that way." They were silent for a moment. "Where does that leave us?" David asked. "I don't know," Emily said honestly. "But I know that if we're going to try, it has to be without games, no tests, no lies by omission, no fear of being who we really are. Do you want to try?" Emily studied him for a long moment. "Maybe, but with one condition." "What?" "I want to meet your daughter, properly. If we're going to do this, she needs to be a part of it." The suggestion surprised David. "It has to be." "Are you sure?" "I am. Emma is an important part of your life. If I'm going to be in your life, I need to be in hers too." David felt a mix of relief and nervousness. "What if she doesn't like you?" Then we'll find that out soon and stop wasting time. It was typical of Emily. Straightforward, practical, brave. And for the first time in a week, David allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. The formal introduction between Emily and Emma took place on a Saturday afternoon in April at Central Park. David had carefully chosen the location. Neutral, public, with plenty of distractions in case the meeting didn't go well. He arrived first with Emma, who was clearly nervous, fiddling with her hair every 5 minutes. "Dad, what if she doesn't like me?" Emma asked for the third time as they walked toward the lake. "Why wouldn't she like you?" David asked, trying to hide his own anxiety. "I don't know. Maybe she thinks I'm too childish or too boring." David stopped and crouched down to be at eye level with his daughter. "Emma, you are one of the smartest people I know. If she doesn't like you, the problem is hers, not yours." Emma nodded, but David could see she wasn't convinced. Emily arrived 15 minutes later, gracefully maneuvering her way along the paved path. She wore a coral blouse and jeans, more casual than David was used to seeing her. As she approached, he noticed she also seemed nervous, something rare for someone usually so composed. "Hi," Emily said as she stopped near them. "Hi," David replied. "Emily, this is Emma. Emma, this is Emily." Emma froze for a moment, clearly unsure whether to shake hands, wave, or what. Emily resolved the dilemma by extending her hand with a warm smile. "Nice to meet you, Emma. Your dad talks about you all the time." "He talks about you too," Emma said, shaking the offered hand. "You're much prettier than I imagined." Emily genuinely laughed. "Thank you. You're beautiful too. You definitely got the right genes in the family." David watched the first moment of tension ease slightly. "How about we take a walk? Emma wanted to show me where she feeds the ducks." For the first 20 minutes, the conversation was hesitant. Emma responded to Emily's questions with polite monosyllables, and Emily was clearly trying to find the right tone, not too maternal, not too distant. The situation changed when they found a family of ducks near the lake. "Can I feed them?" Emma asked David. "You can, but just a little. The park ranger said too much bread is bad for them." Emma took some pieces of bread from her backpack and started tossing them into the water. The ducks immediately swam over, creating a small aquatic frenzy. "Look!" Emma exclaimed. "The little one is being pushed by the bigger ones." Emily observed for a moment. "He needs a strategy." "What do you mean?" "Throw a piece far away from the big ducks. The little one is faster. He'll get there first." Emma followed the suggestion, and it worked perfectly. The smaller duck managed to get its share of bread without interference from the adults. "How did you know that?" Emma asked, genuinely impressed. "Experience," Emily said. "Sometimes being smaller means you have to be smarter." Emma looked at Emily with renewed interest. "Were you small when you were a kid?" "I was the smallest in my class until I was 14. I had to come up with creative ways to get things." "Like what?" Emily thought for a moment. "Once, I really wanted a book that was on the highest shelf in the school library, but I was too embarrassed to ask the librarian for help." "And what did you do?" "I stacked 3 chairs so no one would see. It worked, but when I got down, I knocked all the chairs over and made a terrible noise." Emma laughed, imagining the scene. "And did you get in trouble?" "The librarian made me organize books for a week, but it was worth it." The book was amazing. David watched his daughter relax for the first time since Emily arrived. There was something in the way Emily told the story, without condescension, treating Emma as an equal, that clearly captivated her. They walked to the playground area where Emma hesitated. "Dad, can I play for a little bit?" "Don't you think you're a bit too old for the playground?" David joked. "You're never too old for swings," Emily said seriously. "It's one of the best feelings in the world." Emma smiled and ran to the swings. David and Emily positioned themselves nearby, watching. "She's wonderful," Emily said. "Yes, she is, but she's being too polite. Normally she would be much more intense. She's testing me." "Probably." Emily watched Emma swing, clearly thinking about something. "David, can I try something?" "What?" "Trust me." Emily approached the swings. "Emma, can I ask you a direct question?" Emma slowed her swinging. "Sure." "What do you really think about me?" The question caught Emma off guard. She glanced quickly at her dad, then back at Emily. "Promise you won't get mad." "I promise." Emma took a deep breath. "I think you're cool, but I'm scared you don't really. Like my dad." The child's brutal honesty left David breathless, but Emily didn't seem surprised. "Why do you think that?" "Because you're so elegant, and my dad is kind of simple. He wears the same blue shirt to every important meeting and thinks I don't notice." Emma looked directly at Emily. "And also because his last girlfriends always left when they found out he had a daughter." David felt like sinking into the ground. Emily, however, nodded, as if the explanation made perfect sense. "I see. And do you think I'll do the same thing?" "I don't know. Maybe." Emily was quiet for a moment. "Emma, can I tell you a secret?" Emma nodded. "I'm scared of the same thing, just the opposite." "Emma, have you ever thought about getting a math tutor?" "How come?" "I'm afraid your dad will decide that dating someone like me is too complicated, that it would be easier to find someone without—" Emily gestured vaguely towards the wheelchair. Emma seemed to consider this. "But my dad isn't like that." "How do you know?" "Because when my mom left, he could have gotten mad at me. Divorced with a kid complicates everything, right? But he never made me feel like a problem." The observation hit David hard. Emma had articulated something he had never been able to put into words. Emily smiled. "You're right. Your dad isn't like that. It was one of the first things I noticed about him." "So you two are afraid of the same silly thing?" "Looks like it." Emma got off the swing and walked over to where they were. "Can I give my opinion?" "Please," Emily said. "You both should stop being scared and just, I don't know, date normally." David and Emily exchanged glances and laughed. "It sounds simple when you put it that way," David said. "It's because it is simple," Emma said with the confidence of a 12-year-old. "Adults complicate everything." For the rest of the afternoon, the dynamic changed completely. Emma began asking genuine questions about Emily's life, and Emily responded with honesty, appropriate for the girl's age. They discovered they both liked reading fantasy, thought horror movies were silly, and had strong opinions about the best way to eat pizza. "Pepperoni has to be with stuffed crust," Emma declared. "I completely agree," Emily said. "And anyone who eats pizza with a fork and knife should be arrested." "You're cool," Emma said, finally relaxing completely. When they parted at the end of the afternoon, Emma surprised everyone by giving Emily a hug. "It was fun," she said. "Can we do it again?" "Whenever you want," Emily replied. In the car on the way home, Emma was unusually quiet. "So," David asked, "what did you think?" "She's different from what I thought." "Different how?" "More real. I thought she would be all stuck up, you know. But she's funny, and she doesn't pretend to be my best friend just to impress you." David smiled. "And what does that mean?" Emma studied him through the rearview mirror. "It means you can keep dating her, if you want." "Thanks for the permission." "Dad?" "Yes? You really like her, don't you?" David considered the question. After months of uncertainty, fears and misunderstandings, the answer finally seemed clear. "Yes, Emma. I like her a lot." "She likes you too. You could tell." "How?" "The way she looked at you when you weren't watching, like you really mattered." That night, After Emma went to bed, David called Emily. "How was it for you?" he asked. "Your daughter is amazing, smart, straightforward, brave." "She takes after her dad," David joked. "Definitely. And David." "Yes? Thank you. Why?" "For trusting me enough to introduce me to her, for letting me be part of the most important thing in your life." David felt a tightness in his chest, not from anxiety, but from something he took time to recognize as genuine happiness. "Thank you for wanting to be part of it. Always." When they hung up, David realized that for the first time since the beginning of their relationship, he felt like he was on the right track. Emma approved of Emily. Emily clearly cared about Emma, and he was truly falling in love, which he would soon discover would make the upcoming challenges even more painful. May arrived with an unusual chill for New York, and David found himself in a nearly domestic rhythm with Emily. She dined at his apartment at least twice a week, always bringing expensive ingredients that turned simple meals into something special. Emma had developed the habit of showing her homework to Emily, especially math, where she struggled the most. It was on one of those Wednesday nights, while Emma wrestled with first-degree equations at the kitchen table and David washed the dishes, that Emily made a casual remark that would change everything. "Emma, have you ever thought about getting a math tutor?" Emily asked, looking over the girl's shoulder. "My dad can't afford a tutor," Emma said, without looking up from her notebook. David felt his face heat up. It was true, private lessons cost at least $80 an hour, money that simply didn't fit into his tight budget. "What if I paid?" Emily offered naturally. "No," David said quickly, turning from the sink. "Thank you, but that's not necessary." "Why not? It would be my pleasure to help." "Because I take care of my daughter's needs." Emily noticed the tension in his voice. "David, I didn't mean to offend. I was just offering help. And I appreciate it, but I don't need charity." The word hung in the air like an insult. Emma looked from one to the other, clearly uncomfortable. "It wasn't charity," Emily said calmly. "It was an offer from someone who cares about both of you." "It's the same thing." "No, it's not." Emma slammed her notebook shut. "Can I go to my room? You guys are going to fight and I don't want to." "Listen." David felt terrible. "Emma, we're not fighting." "You are. Whenever you talk about money, you get weird." Emma looked at Emily. "Thank you for wanting to help me. My dad is a bit proud, but he's not bad." Emma left the kitchen, leaving David and Emily in awkward silence. "Sit here," Emily said, motioning to the chair in front of her. "We need to talk." David sat down reluctantly. "David, why did you react that way?" "Because I don't like the feeling that you're trying to solve our problems with money. That's not what I'm doing." "Isn't it? You pay for fancy dinners, offer gifts for Emma, now you want to pay for a tutor. And is that bad?" "It's embarrassing," David admitted. "It makes me feel like I can't take care of my own family." Emily studied him for a moment. "David, can I tell you why I offered to pay for the tutor, if you want?" "Because Emma is a brilliant kid who is struggling with math, and I know this might affect her self-esteem, because you are a wonderful father doing the best you can with the resources you have, and because I have resources to help and would like to use that luck for something positive." David felt foolish, but he couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy. "Emily, you don't understand." "What don't I understand?" "How humiliating it is to need your girlfriend to pay for things." "But I'm not paying for things. I offered help with something specific." "It's different for you," David said more harshly than he intended. "You've always had money. Even when your inheritance was cut off, you had investments. You had a safety net. You never had to choose between buying medicine for your daughter or paying the electricity bill." Emily was quiet for a long moment. "You're right," she finally said. "I've never been through that." "Then you don't understand how it feels." "Maybe not, but I understand what it's like to be judged by your circumstances. Emily looked at him. The difference is that you judge me for having too much, and others judge me for having little control over my own body. The comparison hit him. It's not the same, isn't it? Both are prejudices based on things outside our control. David had no answer for that. Emily sighed. David, can I ask you something direct? Sure. Are you ashamed of me? The question surprised him. What do you mean? About my expensive clothes, my car, the fact that I have money? Are you ashamed to be seen with me? No, of course not. Then what's the real problem here? David was quiet, trying to articulate feelings he didn't fully understand himself. The problem is that sometimes I feel like I'm in a relationship where I can't contribute equally. Contribute how? Financially. You pay for expensive restaurants, buy gifts, offer help. I can't reciprocate in the same way. Emily leaned forward. David, do you think a relationship is about who pays for what? No, but do you think I care if you can take me to the View or just to the Italian restaurant? Maybe not consciously, but... David, stop! Emily interrupted him. You're creating problems where there aren't any. I'm being practical. You're being proud, and your pride is getting in the way of our happiness. The accusation hurt because it was true. David knew he was sabotaging the relationship, but he couldn't stop. Emily, maybe we're just not compatible. Because of money? Because of different worlds? Emily was very quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with sadness. You know what's most ironic? I spent years being rejected by men who thought I was a burden. And now I'm being rejected by a man who thinks I'm too privileged. Emily, no, let me finish. She took a deep breath. You're right about one thing. We have different worlds, but not in the way you think. What do you mean? My world is full of people who measure worth by what you have. Your world is full of people who measure worth by what you do. I thought together we could create a world where worth is measured by who you are. David felt a tightness in his chest. Emily, I want that too. But you can't believe it's possible. She was right, and they both knew it. Emily maneuvered her chair toward the door. I'm going home. I need to think. Emily, wait. You don't have to leave angry. I'm not angry, she said, and her voice was heavy with something worse than anger, disappointment. I'm sad. Why? Because you're wasting something good out of fear of something that exists only in your head. After Emily left, David sat in the kitchen for an hour, staring at the math notebook Emma had left on the table. The equations seemed simpler than his own feelings. Emma appeared in the doorway, clearly having heard Emily leave. Did she go? She did. Did you break up? David didn't know how to respond. It's complicated. Emma came closer and sat in the chair Emily had occupied. Dad, can I tell you something? Sure. You're being foolish. Emma, no, listen. Emily is nice. She treats me well, treats you well, and you laugh together. Who cares if she has more money than we do? It's not that simple. It is, Emma insisted. You're afraid she's better than you. But you know what I learned in school about bullying? David raised his eyebrows. What? That sometimes people attack others because they feel bad about themselves. It's not about the other person. It's about them. His 12-year-old daughter's observation hit him like a slap in the face. Do you think I'm bullying Emily? I think you're hurting her because you're hurt. David looked at Emma. When had she become so wise? And what if I can't get over this? Then you'll lose the best thing that's happened to us in a long time. That night, David stayed up late thinking about the conversation. Emma was right. He was sabotaging the relationship out of fear and pride, but recognizing the problem and solving it were two completely different things. On Thursday, he tried to call Emily. She answered, but the conversation was formal, distant. "Hi," she said. "Hi, how are you?" "Fine, you?" "Emily, can we talk? In person?" There was a pause. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Please, 5 minutes." "David, I don't want another conversation about how we're incompatible. If that's what you want to talk about, it's not. Then what is it? I want to apologize, and I want to try to understand how to make this work." Another longer pause. "Okay, but not at my apartment. Let's meet in a neutral place. Wherever you want. Central Park, Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. When he hung up, David knew that this would probably be his last chance to save the relationship. The question was, would he be able to let go of the... On that Saturday morning in May, Central Park was bustling. David arrived 10 minutes early and found Emily already waiting by the lake, watching families having picnics and children playing. She wore a beige wool coat and jeans, and there was something different about her posture, less upright, more vulnerable. "Hi," he said, approaching cautiously. "Hi." Emily didn't smile, but she didn't seem hostile either. David sat on the bench next to her, keeping a respectful distance. For a few minutes they sat in silence, watching a group of children feed the ducks. "Emily," he finally began, "I need to apologize." For which specific part? The question was fair. For all of it. For reacting poorly. To your offer of help? For creating problems where there were none? For letting my pride get in the way of our happiness? Emily nodded but remained quiet. "Emma told me something that made me think," David continued. "She said that sometimes people attack others because they feel bad about themselves. Your daughter is very wise." "She is. And she was right. It wasn't about you having money. It was about me feeling inadequate." Emily finally turned to look at him. "David, do you really think I care how much money you have?" "Rationally, no. But emotionally, it's hard." "Why?" David took a deep breath. "Because my marriage ended, in part, over financial issues. Sarah always complained that I wasn't ambitious enough, that other husbands provided more for their wives. When she left me, one of the last things she said was that I would never be able to offer the life she deserved." Emily was quiet for a moment. "And do you think all women think like that?" "Not all. But you have a life that I could never provide. And sometimes that makes me feel like it's only a matter of time before you realize that too. David, look at me." He turned to face her. "Do you know what the best moment we've had together has been so far?" David thought. "I don't know. Maybe when we watched the movie at home and Emma kept commenting on every scene." Emily smiled for the first time that morning. Exactly what did it cost? $20 for popcorn and soda, and it was perfect. "But you're used to better things, David. Can I tell you about my last serious relationship?" He nodded. "It lasted 2 years. He was a doctor, made good money, always paid for everything. He took me to the best restaurants, expensive trips, elaborate gifts." David felt a pang of jealousy. "And what happened? I found out he was with me because I was a trophy, the rich, disabled girlfriend that showed how evolved and generous he was. When we fought, he always threw in my face how good he was to me, how other men wouldn't have the patience." The revelation hit David like a punch. "Emily, you know what hurt me the most? It wasn't the condescension. It was the fact that he never saw me as an equal. I was always the poor. One thing he was saving. I would never see you that way. I know. That's why I'm here." Emily turned completely towards him. "David, you treat me like a normal woman. Sometimes you even forget about the wheelchair. That's rare and precious. So why do fights about money always ruin everything between us? Because you can't accept that maybe, just maybe, I would choose to be with you even if you were a millionaire or a homeless person." The simplicity of the statement disarmed him. How can I be sure? You can't. Relationships require faith. Emily hesitated. David, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Of course. After the accident, I didn't date anyone for 2 years, not because I couldn't, but because I was so afraid of being rejected or accepted for the wrong reasons. David watched her, seeing the vulnerability she rarely showed. The first date I accepted was with a lawyer a friend introduced me to. At the end of the night, he told me he thought it was admirable how I didn't let my disability get me down, as if my personality was a heroic consequence of the accident. What an idiot! The second was with a businessman who seemed genuinely interested, until I found out he had a fetish for disabled women. David felt nauseous. Seriously, and then there were several others, some who felt pity, others who wanted to save me, some who thought I would be too grateful to make demands. Emily, I'm so sorry. When I met you, you were nervous, clearly out of your comfort zone, but you treated me like a person. Not like a poor thing, not like an inspiration, not like a charity project, like a woman. David felt a tightness in his chest. And now I'm ruining this because of stupid insecurities. Not stupid, understandable, but they need to be worked on if we want to continue. They sat in silence again, watching the activity in the park. A nearby family was celebrating a child's birthday, and the sound of laughter carried to them on the wind. Emily, David finally said, can I ask you about your work? She seemed surprised. Sure. You're always vague when you talk about it. Clients, projects, trips. You never give details. Emily sighed. Because it's complicated. How so? My work exists because of a federal law that requires companies to be accessible. Most of my clients hire me not because they want to be inclusive, but because they need to comply with regulations. And is that bad? It's not bad, but it's frustrating. You arrive at a company, they spend $50,000 on renovations to put in a few ramps and an accessible bathroom, and they think they've solved the inclusion problem. David began to understand. They're not really interested in change. Exactly. It's important work, but sometimes I feel like I'm putting a band-aid on bigger problems. That's why you don't like to talk about work. Also because some clients treat me like a curiosity. How interesting to have a disabled consultant to talk about accessibility. How could my condition be my only qualification? David felt anger towards her. But you are qualified regardless. I am. I specialized in ergonomics, studied legislation, and have international certifications. But sometimes it feels like none of that matters as much as the fact that I use a wheelchair. Is that why you tested my reaction so much at the beginning? Emily nodded. I wanted to see if you could see me beyond the chair, and you could. It was liberating. David felt terrible for almost throwing away something so rare and valuable because of financial insecurities. Emily, I want to try again, but I need your help. What kind of help? Teach me to deal with the differences between our financial situations, because they exist, and pretending they don't isn't working. Emily considered this. Okay, but with some rules. What rules? First, when I offer to pay for something, you can say no, but you can't get angry. Second, when you want to split something, I will accept even if I don't need to. Third, we stop keeping score of who pays for what. And the fourth, you stop assuming that I'm with you despite our differences and start considering that maybe I'm with you because of who you are. David smiled for the first time since Wednesday. Can I hug you? Sure. He leaned in and hugged her, feeling the tension of the past few days dissolve. Emily smelled of the subtle perfume he had learned to associate with safety and affection. David, she said against his shoulder. "Can I ask you something? Anything. Next time you feel insecure about something, can you talk to me before creating a crisis? I promise. And can I ask you another thing?" "Of course." "Let me help with Emma's math teacher. Not as charity, but as someone who cares about both of you." David took a deep breath, fighting the instinct to refuse. "Okay, but I'll pay half." "David, it's what I can contribute right now. Let me contribute." Emily smiled. "Okay, half each." As they walked back to the cars, David felt like he had narrowly avoided a disaster. More importantly, he felt he was finally learning to accept that relationships weren't about competition or adequacy. They were about mutual choice and genuine care. "Want to have dinner at home tonight?" he asked. "Emma is missing you, and I promise not to be weird if you bring expensive ingredients." Emily laughed. "I'll bring salmon." Perfect. And for the first time in days, David truly believed it would be. June arrived with its chilly mornings and sunny afternoons typical of New York winters. David had settled into a comfortable routine. Emily would have dinner at home on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Emma had her math tutoring twice a week, and the three often spent Sundays together in the park, or at home, watching movies. It was on a Sunday afternoon, while Emma was riding her bike in Central Park and David and Emily were chatting on a bench, that everything changed in a matter of seconds. Emma was confidently pedaling down the bike path. She had learned to ride a bike at 6 years old and was skilled even on the tightest turns. David watched her with the typical pride of a parent, pointing out to Emily how Emma could accelerate without losing balance. "She's really talented," Emily commented. "I bet she'll want a mountain bike for her next birthday." "Probably. She's already researching models online," David laughed. It was at that moment that a large dog, seemingly lost, ran out of the bushes directly onto the bike path. Emma tried to swerve, braked suddenly, and the front wheel got stuck in a crack in the pavement. The bike stopped abruptly, but her body continued moving, pitching her over the handlebars. David stood up reflexively, shouting his daughter's name. Emily was already maneuvering her chair towards the accident site before he even started to run. Emma was on the ground, crying and holding her right arm against her body. Her shirt was torn at the shoulder, and there was blood on her left knee. "Emma! Emma, how are you?" David knelt beside her, trying to assess her injuries without touching her. "My arm, Dad," Emma sobbed. "It hurts a lot." Emily arrived and immediately took control of the situation. "Emma, can you move your fingers?" she asked calmly. Emma tried and groaned in pain. "A little, but it hurts." "Okay, don't try anymore. David, we need to take her to the hospital. It could be a fracture." "Do you think so?" "Her wrist is swelling quickly, and she can't support her arm. Better not to take any chances." A small group of people had gathered around them. An elderly woman offered water. A young man offered to call an ambulance, but Emily politely declined. "It'll be faster if we take her in my car," she said. "David, you carry Emma. I'll take the bike in the trunk." On the way to New York Hospital, Emma leaned her head on her dad's shoulder in the back seat, trying not to cry. "Is it going to hurt when they touch my arm?" she asked. "Maybe a little," Emily said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "But the doctors will give you pain medicine first, and it will pass quickly. Have you ever broken a bone?" Emily hesitated for just a second. "Yes, a few times." "Because of the accident?" "Emma," David began, thinking the question was too personal. "It's okay," Emily said. "Yes, I broke a few ribs and my left femur in the accident. It hurt a lot, but it healed. And now it doesn't hurt anymore? Sometimes when it's going to rain, but day to day, no." Emma seemed to calm down with the conversation. "Emily." "Yes?" "Will you stay with me at the hospital?" David saw Emily glance quickly at him in the rearview mirror before answering. "Of course I will, if your dad lets me." "Please, Dad. Emily knows about broken bones." David felt a tightness in his chest at his daughter's trust. "Of course, sweetheart." In the emergency room, Emily showed a surprising familiarity with the hospital environment. She knew exactly which papers David needed to fill out, where to locate. The on-call doctor was figuring out how to position Emma in the temporary wheelchair to minimize discomfort. "Have you worked in a hospital?" David asked while they waited in the triage line. "Not exactly," Emily replied, "but I've spent a lot of time in hospitals after the accident. I learned how things work." When they were finally seen, the doctor, a young resident who looked to be around David's age, carefully examined Emma's arm. "We'll do an X-ray to be sure, but it looks like a simple fracture of the radius," he said. "Nothing complicated. It will heal perfectly." During the examinations, Emily stayed with Emma while David dealt with the administrative issues. When he returned, he found the two of them whispering. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "Emily was telling me about physical therapy," Emma said. "She said it's boring at first, but it gets easier later." "Physical therapy?" The doctor returned with the results. "Confirmed fracture. We'll immobilize it with a cast, and she'll need to do physical therapy in a few weeks to regain full mobility." While Emma was getting the cast, pink at her insistence, David noticed how Emily followed each step of the procedure with professional attention. "You understand a lot about this," he commented. "I learned out of necessity," Emily said, "and also, I worked as a physical therapist before the accident." David stopped filling out the insurance form. "What do you mean?" "It was my profession. I graduated in physical therapy from a university, worked for 2 years at a rehabilitation clinic." "You never told me that." Emily looked at Emma, who was distracted admiring her new cast. "I don't like to talk about my life before the accident." "Why not?" "Because it hurts," she simply said. "Imagine dedicating your career to helping people regain movement and then losing your own." David felt a tightness in his chest. "Emily, it's all okay now," she quickly said. "I've found a new way to help people, but back then it was hard." It was almost 8 in the evening when they finally left the hospital. Emma was tired but excited about all the attention she had received. In the car, she fell asleep, leaning against her father. "Thank you," David said softly to Emily, "for everything, for knowing what to do, for staying with us, for taking care of her." "You don't need to thank me." "I do. You cancelled your plans to stay in a hospital with a child who isn't even your daughter." Emily was quiet for a moment. "David, can I tell you something?" "Of course. I've never had a family of my own. After I cut ties with my parents, I never had anyone who cared enough about me to want me in a hospital." David felt a lump in his throat. "Emily, today was the first time in years that I felt needed, not because I'm a consultant or because I have money or because I'm an example of overcoming, but because 2 people I love needed me." The word love hung in the air between them. Neither had used that word before. "Do you love us?" David asked softly. "I do," Emily said without hesitation. "I love both of you, and I know it's too soon, and I know it's complicated, but it's the truth." David felt his eyes welling up. "I love you too, and Emma does as well. Did you see how she asked you to stay?" "I did. I've never seen her do that with anyone, not even with Sarah." Emily parked in front of David's building and turned to him. "What does this mean for us?" "It means we stop being afraid," David said. "It means we try to build something real, together, even with all the complications, especially with all the complications." Emily smiled, the most genuine smile he had ever seen on her. "David." "Yes?" "Can I sleep here tonight? On the couch? I want to make sure Emma is okay during the night." You can sleep in my bed. I'll take the couch. You don't have to. Emily, David interrupted her. Accept the offer without questioning. She laughed. Okay. As they went up in the elevator, with Emma still half asleep in her father's arms, David realized that that day had changed something fundamental between them. Not just because there had been declarations of love, but because Emily had allowed herself to be vulnerable, had shared painful parts of her story, and had naturally positioned herself as part of the family. And for the first time since the beginning of their relationship, David allowed himself to imagine a future where the three of them were truly a family, with all the complications, joys, and challenges that entailed. December arrived with the suffocating heat typical of New York, and Emily was radiant in a way David had never seen before. It had been 3 weeks since she signed the lease for a renovated warehouse in Greenwich Village, and since then she'd been spending her days coordinating renovations, interviewing physical therapists, and organizing what would be the Emily Thompson Community Rehabilitation Center. "Dad, look at this," Emma exclaimed one Saturday morning, showing the laptop on the kitchen table. "Emily is in the newspaper." David approached and saw an article on the New York Times titled, "Former Heiress Creates Free Rehabilitation Center on the West Side of Manhattan." The photo showed Emily at the future center, surrounded by physical therapy equipment still in boxes, with a smile radiating determination and happiness. She didn't tell. "It was going to be in the newspaper," David said, reading the article. The report told Emily's story. The break with her family, the accident, the decision to use her savings to create a space that offered free rehabilitation for low-income people. "There's a part here about you and Emma," Emma said, pointing to the end of the article. David read, "Emily credits part of her motivation for the project to her boyfriend, accountant David Johnson, and stepdaughter Emma, 13. They taught me that family is not about blood or money. It's about choosing to care for each other every day," says the physical therapist. David felt a tightness in his chest. "She called me her boyfriend in the newspaper. And she called me her stepdaughter." Emma seemed ecstatic. "Can I show this to my friends?" Before David, Emily smiled as she answered the phone. "Did you see?" she asked as soon as he picked up. "I did. Why didn't you tell me the journalist was going to write about us?" "Because I didn't plan to talk about you. But she asked about my motivation, and you two are my motivation." David smiled. "Emma is beaming. She's going to show it to the whole school." "And you? How do you feel being publicly called my boyfriend?" David looked at Emma, who was still reading the article, with a huge smile. "I feel proud of you, of what you're doing, of being part of your life. Do you want to come see the center today? The last equipment has arrived." "Sure. Emma wants to go too." The Community Rehabilitation Center was located on a quiet street in Greenwich Village, in a warehouse that had been completely renovated. When they arrived, David was impressed by the transformation. The space had white walls, plenty of glass for natural light, and was divided into several areas: physical therapy, occupational therapy, a small pool for hydrotherapy, and even a meeting room for families. "Emily, this is amazing," he said, observing the space. "There's still a lot to do," she said, but there was pride in her voice. "But I think it's going to work." Emma was exploring everything with curiosity. "How many people will be able to come here?" "Initially, we'll serve about 80 patients a month," Emily explained. "Children, adults, seniors, anyone who needs rehabilitation and can't afford it." "And how are you going to pay for all this?" David asked, always practical. "I have reserves for the first 2 years. After that, I'll seek partnerships with the city government and donations from businesses." David watched her explain the project details with passion and technical knowledge. It was a version of Emily he rarely saw, not the sophisticated woman from expensive restaurants, nor the insecure girlfriend during discussions about money, but the competent professional who had found her true calling. "David," Emily suddenly said, "can I ask you a favor?" "Of course." "I want you to be the accountant for the center." Officially, the proposal caught him off guard. "Emily, are you sure? I may not have experience with non-profits." "Exactly for that reason. I need someone I trust, who will handle the money as if it were their own, who won't try to take advantage of me or charge more because I can afford it." David looked around the space, imagining the responsibility of managing the finances of something so important. "How much were you thinking of paying?" "Market rate. What you would charge any other client." "Emily, no discussions about money," she said firmly. "It's work. You're qualified. I'll pay." "A fair price," David smiled. "Okay, I accept." Emma came running from the pool area. "Emily, can I ask a question?" "Sure." "Are you going to marry my dad?" The question left David blushing and Emily speechless for a moment. "Emma?" David said. "What? It's a normal question. You love each other, practically live together on weekends, and now you're going to work together?" Emily laughed. "Emma, your dad hasn't proposed to me yet." "But what if he did?" "Emma, that's not your business," David said, mortified. "Of course it is. If you guys get married, she'll be my official stepmother. I have the right to know." Emily looked at David, amused by his embarrassment. "If your dad proposed to me," she said calmly, "I would probably say yes." Emma celebrated as if her team had just scored a goal. "I knew it." That night, after Emma went to bed, David and Emily sat on the balcony of his apartment, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about the future of the center. "Were you serious today?" David asked. "About, you know, about marriage?" "I was." "Why?" Emily turned in her chair to face him. "Because in the last 8 months I've learned that you're a good man, that you're a wonderful father, that you make me laugh, and that you accept me as I am. Because when Emma got hurt, my first instinct was to protect her as if she were my daughter. Because when I think about the future, you two are in it." David felt his heart race. "Emily, and also because I know you're still afraid to take that step." She was right. The idea of marriage scared him, not because he didn't love Emily, but because it meant publicly acknowledging that they had managed to overcome all the differences and complications. "I'm not afraid to marry you," he finally said. "I'm afraid of not being the husband you deserve." "David, you still don't understand." "What?" "You already are." The following Sunday, David woke up with a certainty he hadn't felt in years. He took Emma to spend the day at Lisa's house and told his sister that he needed to do something important. He drove to a jewelry store at the local mall and spent 2 hours choosing a ring. Nothing flashy, but beautiful and classic. He used the money he had been saving to buy a new car, and he didn't regret it for a second. That evening, when Emily arrived for dinner, David was as nervous as a teenager. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing his agitation. "Emily, can I tell you something?" "Sure." They sat on the sofa, and David took a deep breath. "In the last 8 months, you've turned my life upside down. You've forced me to question things I thought I knew, taught me that love isn't about being perfect, and shown me that family is about choice, not circumstances." Emily watched him with growing attention. "You love my daughter as if she were your own. Accept my financial limitations without making me feel small, and have built something beautiful and important that will help hundreds of people." David took the small box from his pocket. "So yes, I'm asking you to marry me. Not because I think we should, not because Emma expects it, but because I want to spend the rest of my life learning to be the man you see in me." Emily looked at the ring, then at him, and her eyes filled with tears. "David, you'll have to deal with a middle-class accountant who sometimes feels insecure, a teenager who will test you until you prove that you won't abandon the family. and a life that will be neither glamorous nor easy. Emily laughed through her tears. Yes. 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 I will marry you. Yes, I want to handle all of this. Yes, I want to build a somewhat crazy and completely ours family. David slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and kissed her right there on the small sofa, in the simple apartment where they had learned to truly love each other. When Emma got home an hour later, she found them still embraced on the sofa. "Dad, why is Emily crying? Did you two fight?" "On the contrary," David said, "we're getting married." Emma looked at the ring on Emily's finger, then at the smiles on both their faces, and screamed so loudly that the neighbors knocked on the wall. "I knew it. I knew you two would end up together. Can I tell Aunt Lisa? Can I help choose the dress? Can I be a bridesmaid?" "You can do everything," Emily said, pulling Emma into the hug. And there, in the small apartment in Queens, the three embraced, laughed and cried, knowing they had found something that not everyone is lucky enough to find. A chosen family, built with love, patience, and the courage to believe that second chances can be even better than first ones. 6 months later, they got married in a simple ceremony at the Community Rehabilitation Center, surrounded by the patients Emily treated, the neighbors who had become family, and relatives who finally understood that true love is not measured in money or perfection, but in the willingness of two imperfect people to build something greater than themselves together. And when the party ended, with decorations made from recycled materials and food prepared by the guests themselves, David and Emily danced their first dance as husband and wife in the therapy room, surrounded by the people who had learned that life always offers a second chance to those who have the courage to accept love when it arrives. If you like this, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and if you watched until now, comment, "I watched until here," and leave your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the final screen. It's going to be very emotional.